First of all, we cannot ignore people feeling distant. Failing to address people's fears will only lead to increased polarization. We need to listen to their concerns and be honest about where we could have done better. It is much easier to drive a populist black and white narrative than a constructive pro-European centrist narrative. But I am convinced that if you counter that narrative by explaining why decisions are taken and why Europe continues to be a success, notwithstanding all the challenges, then people will come out to vote. And we should not take Europe for granted. In the scope of the elections, the challenge is not only populism, as you mentioned in your question, but also the silent majority, who may not vote if they feel that their vote doesn't count. It is our task, and this is what me and my colleagues have embarked on and will do until the day of the elections, is to convince them that voting matters.
Mulțumesc. Cred că este atât de mult de spus aici încât
I believe there is so much that can be said that we could maybe need the entire time of the electoral campaign to address it. But I will still try to attempt an answer.
Unde să ne concentrăm?
Maybe ask questions instead of an answer. See where we should put our focus so that we encourage citizens to feel confident in what the EU does for them. I've said this and I'm going to keep saying it. There is quite a decalage. We have too much distance between citizens and politicians in EU. We must close this gap. We need medium and long-term solutions rather than short-term solutions. And we should discuss these solutions together with those that will have to be the ones to enforce them or who will have to bear the consequences. You know that recently we have a lot of turmoil in the EU because of the common agricultural policy. The decisions were made in 2020, so before the pandemic, before COVID. Now we are in 2024. So then why, after 4 years, we now see massive protests, farmers everywhere in the EU? I think 4 years was a long time for realizing that some concepts need to be reviewed or rediscussed. It took these massive protests to realize that we have to discuss these with the farmers. Which is why I say that sometimes we are too far away, too remote from the interests of people who we are here to help. On the other hand, there are strategic matters that apply to the EU and that we should deal with as soon as possible. How the EU works inside. The EU must become smoother, more efficient. We need to improve the EU's architecture. The EU must enlarge. This is my opinion. We need to include Moldova, Ukraine, and the Western Balkans, because these countries want to be a part of the Union, and we want them to be here with us. So why has this process taken more than 20 years? We need to be more committed and more firm. There are also many other matters that we need to attend to urgently: the climate, the environment, the competitiveness, and many other things, some of which I will address in my plenary speech. Thank you. Right, the elections. The elections will all be held this year. 4 elections is a lot. We will see what is the legal way of holding some of them together or not, if it's legal or constitutional or not. The government will decide. I am not against holding two sets of elections at the same time if they are properly organized and there is good communication ahead of time.
Mai mult altă dată.
I can tell you more at a different time.